Hi, so my name is Caitlin and I am an intern at Tubman. For those of you who don't know, Tubman is a nonprofit organization that has a lot of services for people who have experienced trauma or violence. And so we have a lot of different services that we offer as an agency. Some of them include a 24-hour helpline that people can call if they have questions or if they're in an unsafe environment themselves and want additional support or information around safety planning or just to talk to someone. We also have youth programs, we have housing support, we also have mental health and substance abuse therapies. In addition, we have legal advice. So that could be if someone wanted to get an order for protection, or if they were going through a divorce and had questions about that, or had questions about child support. We have legal advocates who can help with all of those kind of conversations. We also have a shelter, and that's for people who have experienced domestic violence. We have job counseling and a lot more. And so Tubman has all of these services that provide prevention, intervention, outreach, and leadership opportunities within communities to promote safety, hope, and healing. And so Tubman has all of these services because we know that when a violence or a trauma happens, it can be really upsetting to a lot of different areas of someone's life. And so it's really nice to have all of these additional supports. Another service specific to youth is at the Maplewood Mall. We have a youth outreach center called North Star. And so that's where youth can go to access like a computer, or if they needed some food, we have like a food shelf there. We also have clothing, and we have a laundry service for if a youth needs to do laundry. And there's also just a community space where youth can get together and really connect. And so I really want to highlight that service as well. And that's at the Maplewood Mall. And so, like I said, we have all these services because when someone experiences a violence or trauma, it can be really upsetting, especially if someone is experiencing domestic violence. And so, for those of you who don't know, domestic violence is violence within an intimate relationship. And so, that can be violence from someone that you know really well, or someone you live with, or someone that you're in a relationship with. And when someone is experiencing domestic violence, there are a lot of different things that can go into it. So there's a lot of different types of abuse that someone can experience or behaviors that someone can be exposed to. And so one that I want to touch on is kind of that more physical violence. So that would be things like hitting or maybe throwing objects or threatening you with someone with a weapon. And physical abuse or physical violence, sometimes I think people think it's really common because it's really easy to see like bruises, and it's easy to see scratch marks on the body, and it's a little harder to see or to identify more of those like verbal abuses or like emotional abuses, because those are just not as visible. So I think that's important to note, that while physical abuse may be highlighted more in the media or maybe easier to see because of traumas on the body, it's not always the most common type of abuse that someone may be experiencing. So that's just something to note about that. Another example of something that someone may be experiencing if they're in an unhealthy relationship could be verbal abuse. So that could be things like name calling, insults, blaming, more of that verbal things. So like making demands, things like that. Another thing that someone could experience if they're in a domestic violence relationship could be emotional abuse. And so there's a couple things I want to highlight on emotional abuse, because I think that's one of the types of abuses that's kind of harder to identify at times. So one thing under that kind of category would be isolation or isolating. So if your partner is isolating you, they may not let you go to school or let you go to work, or they may be not letting you see like your friends or family, or when you do see your friends or family, they're punishing you in a way. So if you go and see your friend, I'm not going to talk to you for the rest of the day, or I'm not going to respond to you for the rest of the week, as a way to punish you so that you won't do that in the future. So it's definitely a way to control someone. And isolating sometimes I think can be confusing for people, because it feels really good sometimes when your partner really wants you, or really wants to spend time with you, and really wants to give you that attention. Sometimes that can feel like, wow, my partner really loves me. They really want me around a lot. And while that sometimes can be good, everyone deserves to have other relationships and other friendships, other opportunities. You deserve to be able to go to school and go to work and have friendships and be able to connect with other people, and it not being so isolating. Another example that could fall under emotional abuse could be a mind game. And so that kind of is taking someone and kind of making them question their own reality. So I think that's kind of better explained through an example. So an example that I have for that is if you and your partner got into a verbal argument the night before. So you get into a verbal argument at night, and you go to bed, you kind of cool off, you take some space, which is a really healthy thing to do. You take some space, you kind of cool off, you go to bed, and you wake up and you feel like that wasn't fully addressed, that argument, and so you want to go to your partner and talk about that further, which is also a really healthy thing to do, is talking about maybe disagreements or things that are going on in the relationship and keeping that open communication. So you go to your partner and you say, like, hey, I just kind of wanted to talk about that, verbal argument we had last night. That didn't really sit well with me. Maybe we could talk about that further. And your partner says, what argument? Like, we didn't talk last night. We didn't even talk last night. Like, you're so crazy. You always do this. You always go off like this. You're so crazy. And you kind of like take a step back, and in your head, you're thinking, well, like, I thought I remembered that. Maybe I'm confused, or maybe like I dreamt that. I'm pretty sure it happened, but my partner is saying it didn't. And that's a way to to use control and to try to make you question your own reality of situations and events that have happened. And another thing that I want to mention on emotional is stalking. So sometimes I think that stalking can be thought of as like someone hiding outside your like house and bushes or something. And that can happen. That's not always the case. That's not very common. What is more common, it would be if your partner is like monitoring your phone use and like putting a tracker on your phone or your car, monitoring where you're going, monitoring your social media, seeing who you follow or not letting you have social media, kind of those things where they're controlling your behaviors through those kind of methods. Another type of abuse that someone could experience if they're in an unhealthy relationship could be sexual abuse. So one that I really want to note on that would be pressure or coercion to sexual activity. So that's if someone is constantly pressuring you, or there's a power differential. So for example, if you worked at Target as a cashier and your supervisor is up here, you guys are at different power levels because you guys have different titles. That's an imbalance of power. And sometimes that can happen in relationships too, where someone has more power or tries to gain more power. And so if there's an imbalance of power like that, if they're constantly pressuring you, that doesn't result in clear consent. And so even if you say no or want to say no, but you still go ahead and do that activity, that wasn't you giving consent. That was you being pressured and coerced into that. And so that's just kind of important to know about sexual violence. Another way that someone could experience violence in a relationship could be through financial abuse. And this is a really common one for people who are experiencing violence in their relationships, to also be experiencing financial abuse. And some of the examples for financial abuse could be your partner placing your paycheck in their account and not letting you have access to it. So not letting you have access to your own finances. They could also be not letting you work or limiting your work hours as a way for you to not, number one, maybe not leave the house as often, so kind of controlling you in that isolating way, but then at the same time also making you financially dependent on this person because you're not able to work, so you're then financially dependent on this person, and then this person or your partner has all the power and they're using that to control you. And so that's also an example of financial abuse, as well as that emotional abuse with isolation. Some other examples could be if your partner is spending money on themselves but not letting you do the same. So they're able to go and buy new clothes, or they're able to go buy like a new outfit for an interview, but you're not allowed to. Things like that. And then also, it could be where they're buying you presents or taking you on like really expensive dinners or dates, but then expecting something in return. So maybe like a certain behavior or expecting something different. And that's another way to control you, by using like a financial aspect of your relationship. And then another thing that someone could experience in an abusive relationship could be spiritual abuse. So this could be like insulting your religion or practicing your religion. So maybe it could be not letting you practice, or not agreeing to raise your kids the way that you wanted to raise them spiritually, or using your spiritual beliefs to manipulate or shame you. These are all examples of spiritual abuse. And it could also just be kind of like tearing you down and not letting you express yourself spiritually. That's also an example. And so these are just kind of some ways that someone who may be experiencing domestic violence, they may be experiencing these things. And it's really important to know that there are resources and there are ways to connect within the community. And Tubman is a super good resource, since we do have all of these different agencies that kind of follow all these things. So it's really important to connect, and Tubman has a lot of resources. So like I mentioned before, Tubman has a 24-hour helpline, and the number for that is 612-825-0000. So again, that's 612-825-0000. And that's a really good resource. We have a lot of people who answer the phones and can do safety planning and can just kind of talk through what you're going through, or if you have questions about maybe a friend or a family member or just another situation that you wanted to kind of talk about, you could do that. And the people who answer those are fully trained and very capable of answering those questions. And then we also have a website for youth and young adults, and that is at www.mydefinition.org. And so that has a lot of different information and resources. It has blogs, so if you're more interested about these kind of topics, you could always like read a blog posting about it. And there's quizzes, so if you wanted to know like your own communication style within a relationship, you could go to this website and take a quiz on that and kind of see where you fall and how that would impact your relationship. And then we're also on Facebook and Twitter. We do have those platforms. And so our names for that are Tubman MVP. MVP is all in caps, so Tubman MVP. And you can connect with us through Facebook or Twitter. We often post a lot on those, just like different things that youth may be interested in, or upcoming dates for certain services that we provide. So that's a really good resource if you want to get further connected with Tubman. And then if you have any other questions just about our services in general, and you want to know more just about like the depth of what we offer, I know we kind of mentioned it earlier in this video, but I didn't go super in depth on everything. So that website to get more information about our services is www.tubman.org. So now you have like a ton of different ways you can connect with Tubman and in the community. Thank you for listening.